The crystalline halls of the Zalathi diplomatic station floated silently in the void between star systems. Ambassador Kiara stood at the observation deck, her forearms folded behind her back as she watched the eternal darkness sprinkled with distant stars. Her silver skin reflected the soft blue lighting of the station, creating patterns that once would have signaled contentment to any of her kind who might observe. Now, those patterns meant nothing. She had learned to keep her emotions locked away, deep where they could not hurt her anymore. 50 cycles had passed since she had felt anything resembling joy. The Zalathi were a species that bonded for life, their emotional connections running deeper than most races could comprehend. When her bondmate Thyron had died in the terrorist attack on Kepler Station, something inside Kiara had died with him. The telepathic link they had shared since their youth had been severed in an instant, leaving a hollow space in her mind that echoed with silence. She had thrown herself into her work after that. The Galactic Council had been happy to make use of her newfound dedication. A Zalathi who no longer formed emotional connections was rare, and in diplomatic circles it was seen as an advantage. She could negotiate without bias, make decisions without the weight of feelings clouding her judgment. She had become one of the most successful ambassadors in the Council's history, brokering peace between species that had been at war for generations. But success was just a word. Peace was just the absence of conflict. Everything in her life had been reduced to definitions, categories, logical outcomes. She performed her duties with mechanical precision, attended the required social functions, and returned to her empty quarters each night to stare at the stars and feel nothing at all. The soft chime of the door interrupted her meditation. She did not turn around, knowing that her assistant would enter regardless of whether she acknowledged the summons or not. "Ambassador, the human delegation has arrived," Vesnik announced, his young voice carrying the enthusiasm that only those who had not yet been broken by the universe could maintain. Humans, the newest addition to the Galactic Council, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 40 of their years ago. They were still considered curiosities by most of the established species. Bipedal, with only 2 arms and lacking any natural armor or defensive capabilities, they seemed almost fragile compared to the other spacefaring races. Yet they had spread through their local cluster with surprising speed, their adaptability and strange optimism carrying them forward where other species might have faltered. Kiara had read the briefings, of course. Humans were emotional creatures, prone to making decisions based on feelings rather than logic. They formed connections easily, too easily according to some reports, befriending species that most would consider too different to ever understand. They laughed at danger, cried at beauty, and threw themselves into causes with a passion that bewildered the more ancient races. She had no interest in them beyond their potential as trade partners for the Zalathi colonies. This meeting was simply another duty to perform, another box to check in her endless list of responsibilities. "Send them to Conference Room 7, she said, her voice as flat and emotionless as always. "I will be there momentarily." Vesnik hesitated at the door. "Ambassador, I should mention, their lead negotiator is somewhat unusual, even for a human." "Noted," Kiara replied, the word carrying a tone of dismissal that sent her assistant scurrying away. She took one last look at the stars, straightened her formal robes, and made her way to the conference room. The corridors of the station were mostly empty at this hour, which suited her perfectly. She had no desire for small talk with the other diplomats, no patience for their attempts to include her in their social circles. They had learned over the years to leave her alone, and she was grateful for it. Conference Room 7 was one of the smaller meeting spaces, designed for intimate negotiations rather than grand declarations. Kiara entered through the side door, expecting to find the usual collection of human diplomats in their formal attire, seated around the table with their data pads and their eager expressions. Instead, she found chaos. A human male was standing on the conference table, arms spread wide as he appeared to be in the middle of telling a story. Two other humans sat in chairs, laughing at whatever he was saying. Several of the station's service robots had gathered near the walls, their optical sensors focused on the storyteller with what could only be described as fascination, though Kiara knew that was impossible. Robots did not feel fascination. And then, the man on the table was saying, "The Altarian merchant realized he'd been trying to sell sand to a silicon-based life form the entire time. The look on his face, well, he didn't exactly have a face, but you could tell by the way his tentacles drooped that he felt pretty silly about the whole thing." The seated humans burst into fresh laughter. Even the robots seemed to pulse with a sort of mechanical amusement. Kiara cleared her throat. The storyteller turned toward her, and for a moment, their eyes met. He had the typical human features she had seen in the briefings: brown skin, dark hair, only two eyes. But there was something different about him. His eyes held a light that seemed almost impossible, a warmth that reached out across the room like a physical force. He grinned at her, completely unashamed at being caught standing on furniture in a diplomatic facility. "You must be Ambassador Kiara. I'm Marcus Chen, Earth's lead negotiator for this sector. Sorry about the table. I was just showing everyone how the Altarian looked when he realized his mistake. Did you know their tentacles can actually tie themselves in knots when they're embarrassed? Fascinating species." He jumped down from the table with an agility that surprised her, landing lightly on his feet. The other humans stood as well, trying to compose themselves into something resembling professional dignity. "I am Ambassador Kiara," she confirmed, her tone carrying none of the amusement that seemed to radiate from the humans. "Shall we begin the negotiations?" Marcus Chen studied her for a moment. His head tilted slightly to one side in a gesture she had read was common among humans when they were thinking. "Of course," he said finally. "But first, have you eaten? I brought some Earth food to share. There's this thing called pizza that I think you'd love. Well, everyone loves pizza once they try it. It's basically humanity's greatest contribution to galactic culture so far." "I do not require sustenance at this time," Kiara replied. "The trade agreements—" "Can wait a few minutes," Marcus interrupted, which was shocking enough on its own. No one interrupted her anymore. They were all too intimidated by her reputation. "Here's the thing, Ambassador. Humans don't do our best negotiating on empty stomachs, and I've found that sharing a meal is the best way to start any relationship, professional or otherwise. Besides, when was the last time you tried something new?" The question caught her off guard. When was the last time? She could not remember. Her life had become a series of repetitions, the same foods, the same routines, the same empty interactions. She ate for sustenance, not pleasure. She had forgotten that food could be anything more than fuel. "I fail to see how consuming Earth food will impact our negotiations," she said, falling back on cold logic. Marcus grinned again. "That's because you haven't tried pizza yet. Tell you what, give me 10 minutes. If you don't enjoy it, we'll jump straight into the boring stuff. Deal?" There was something about the way he said it, the absolute confidence in his voice, that made her curious despite herself. Curiosity. When was the last time she had felt that? 10 minutes, she agreed. What followed was unlike any diplomatic meeting she had ever attended. Marcus produced a large flat box from somewhere, opening it to reveal a circular food item covered in what he called cheese and various toppings. The smell was interesting. Not unpleasant, though she had long since stopped categorizing things as pleasant or unpleasant. He cut the pizza into triangular pieces and handed one to her with a flourish. "Fair warning," he said. "It's a little hot. Humans have this weird habit of eating food at temperatures that other species consider dangerous. But I promise it's worth it." Kiara took the offered piece, examining it with the same analytical eye she used for treaty documents. The base appeared to be some form of bread, covered with a red sauce, the aforementioned cheese, and various vegetables. It seemed inefficient as a food source, messy and impractical. She took a small bite. Flavor exploded across her palate. Not just taste, but texture, temperature, a complex interplay of sensations that her mind struggled to process. It was chaotic and harmonious at the same time, each component distinct yet working together to create something greater than the sum of its parts. "Good, right?" Marcus said, watching her with those impossibly warm eyes. "The secret is in the sauce, my grandmother's recipe. She always said that food was love you could taste." Love you could taste. What a strange concept. What a human concept. Kiara found herself taking another bite, larger this time. Around her, the other humans and even the service robots seemed to be enjoying their own pieces. The room filled with the sounds of conversation and laughter. When had she last been in a room filled with laughter? "Tell me, Ambassador," Marcus said, settling into a chair across from her with his own slice of pizza. "What made you choose diplomacy as a career?" It was a personal question, the kind she usually deflected with cold professionalism. But something about the way he asked it, genuine interest without prying, made her consider actually answering. "I am effective at it," she said finally. "That's not what I asked," he replied gently. "Being good at something and choosing it are two different things. I'm good at mathematics, but I chose diplomacy because I love meeting new people, learning about different cultures, finding ways to bring folks together." "What called you to this work?" The question hung in the air between them. Kiara found herself thinking back to her youth, before Thyron, before the attack, before the numbness. She had wanted to build bridges between worlds, to create understanding where there had been fear. She had believed that connection was the most powerful force in the universe. "I believed in connection," she heard herself say, the words coming from some deep place she had thought was sealed forever. Marcus nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "Connection's a beautiful thing. Hard sometimes, especially when you've lost someone important. But that's what makes the connections we do form so precious, don't you think?" How did he know? She had not mentioned Thyron, had not spoken of her loss to anyone in decades. Yet somehow this strange human seemed to see right through the walls she had built around herself. "The trade agreements," she said, retreating to safer ground. "We should discuss the terms." "Of course," Marcus agreed, but his smile was soft, understanding. "But first, finish your pizza. Cold pizza is good too, but there's nothing like it when it's fresh." The negotiations that followed were unlike any she had conducted before. Marcus Chen did not approach them as a battle to be won or a puzzle to be solved. Instead, he treated the entire process like a conversation between friends, finding ways to make both sides happy, celebrating each small agreement with genuine enthusiasm. He told stories about Earth, about humanity's stumbling first steps into the galaxy, about the mistakes they had made and the friends they had found along the way. He listened with equal interest to her dry recitations of Zalathi trade policies, somehow finding fascination in the most mundane details. "Did you know," he said at one point, "that humans and Zalathi have almost the same emotional wavelength patterns? I read a study about it. We're compatible on levels that most species aren't. Isn't that amazing?" Kiara had read the same study. She had dismissed it as irrelevant. Emotional compatibility meant nothing to someone who no longer felt emotions. Yet as the hours passed, she found herself oddly reluctant for the meeting to end. Marcus had a way of filling the silence that did not feel intrusive. He respected her boundaries while somehow making her feel included in the warmth that seemed to radiate from him naturally. When they finally concluded the initial negotiations, with terms more favorable than she had expected for both sides, Marcus stood and stretched. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. I'll bring different food. Have you ever tried sushi? It's raw fish, which sounds weird, but trust me on this one. These terms will need to be reviewed by my superiors, Kiara said automatically. Of course, Marcus agreed. But that doesn't mean we can't meet anyway. I'd love to hear more about Zalathi culture. And maybe you could show me around the station? I've been dying to see the observation deck. I heard the view is incredible. She should have said no, should have maintained professional distance, should have retreated to her quarters and her comfortable numbness. The observation deck is best viewed at Aero 300 station time, she heard herself say. The alignment of the local stars creates an unusual optical phenomenon. Marcus's grin could have powered a small moon. It's a date, then. Well, not a date, unless... No, sorry, professional meeting. At the observation deck. To observe things, professionally. For the first time in 50 cycles, Kiara felt the corner of her mouth twitch. Not quite a smile, but the ghost of one. A muscle memory her face had almost forgotten. After the humans left, she remained in the conference room, staring at the empty pizza box. Such a simple thing. Just food. Just a shared meal with strangers. Yet somehow, for a few hours, the hollow space inside her had felt a little less empty. She touched the spot on the table where Marcus had stood to tell his story. Humans were so strange, so chaotic, so alive. Vesnik entered to clean the room, pausing when he saw her still there. Was the meeting satisfactory, Ambassador? He asked carefully. It was... Kiara paused, searching for the right word. For 50 cycles, every meeting had been satisfactory or unsatisfactory, successful or unsuccessful. Binary states with no room for nuance. It was interesting, she said finally. Vesnik's optical membranes widened in surprise, but he wisely said nothing. That night, Kiara stood at her private observation port, looking out at the same stars she watched every night. But for the first time in decades, they did not seem quite so cold or distant. Somewhere among those points of light was Earth, home to a species that put pineapple on pizza and stood on conference tables and asked questions about connection as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. She thought about Marcus Chen's eyes, warm and alive and unafraid. She thought about his grandmother's sauce and love you could taste. She thought about emotional wavelength patterns and compatibility, and the way he had made even the service robots seem to laugh. Tomorrow he would bring something called sushi. Tomorrow she would show him the observation deck. Tomorrow was a word that had meant nothing for so long, just another day to endure. But tonight, for reasons she could not quite understand, tomorrow felt like possibility. The observation deck at Oro 300 hours was a sanctuary of solitude. Kiara had discovered this years ago, when the station's artificial day cycle left most inhabitants asleep, and the vast, transparent aluminum dome offered an unobstructed view of the cosmos. She arrived 15 minutes early, as was her habit, expecting to have time to prepare herself for another encounter with the unpredictable human. Marcus was already there. He sat cross-legged on the floor, ignoring the perfectly functional benches, with a small container beside him and his face turned upward to the stars. The soft blue emergency lighting cast shadows across his features, and for a moment Kiara observed him without announcing her presence. There was something almost meditative about his stillness, a quality she had not expected from someone who seemed to be in constant motion during daylight hours. "The Andromeda Galaxy is visible from here," she said, her voice carrying across the empty space. Marcus did not startle. Instead, he smiled, without looking away from the view above. "I was wondering which one that was. It's beautiful. Everything up there is beautiful. Makes you feel small, doesn't it? But in a good way. Like you're part of something bigger." Kiara moved to stand beside him, maintaining a careful distance. "Most species find the vastness of space intimidating. Most humans, too, Marcus admitted. But I've always found it comforting. All those stars, all those worlds, all those possibilities. Somewhere out there, right now, someone else is probably looking up at their sky and wondering if they're alone. And they're not. None of us are. We just haven't met yet. He patted the floor beside him. Sit with me? The benches are fine. But there's something about sitting on the ground that makes the universe feel more real. Less like you're observing it and more like you're part of it. Kiara hesitated. Sitting on the floor was undignified for an ambassador. It was childish. She sat. The floor was cool through her robes, and the angle did indeed change the perspective. The dome seemed to disappear, leaving them surrounded by stars on all sides. I brought the sushi, Marcus said, opening his container. Fair warning, it's an acquired taste for some species, but I have a theory that every culture in the galaxy has some version of raw fish. It's like a universal constant. Math, physics, and eating things from the ocean. He handed her a small piece, rice wrapped in dark green vegetation with a slice of pink flesh on top. This is salmon. The green stuff is seaweed. And that little green paste? That's wasabi. It's spicy, so maybe skip that for now. Kiara examined the offering with her usual analytical approach before taking a small bite. The flavors were subtle compared to the pizza, delicate and clean. The texture was unusual but not unpleasant. In Japan, where sushi comes from, the chefs train for years to perfect their craft, Marcus explained, his voice soft in the starlight. It's not just about food, it's about respect for the ingredients, precision, artistry. Every piece is supposed to be perfect in its simplicity. You speak of food as if it has meaning beyond sustenance, Kiara observed. Doesn't it? Marcus turned to look at her, those warm eyes curious. For humans, food is never just food. It's culture, history, love, community. When my grandmother made her sauce, she was passing down something her grandmother taught her. When I share it with someone, I'm sharing a piece of my family's story. That's why I brought pizza yesterday. Not to impress you with Earth cuisine, but to share something meaningful with a new friend. Friend. The word hung between them like a star, bright and distant. I do not have friends, Kiara said, the words automatic after so many years. Sure you do, Marcus replied easily. You have me. I decided yesterday. That's how humans work. We meet someone interesting, we share food, we talk under the stars, and boom, friendship. It's that simple. You cannot simply decide to be someone's friend without their consent. Okay, fair point, Marcus grinned. Would you like to be friends, Ambassador Kiara? I promise I'm excellent friend material. I remember birthdays, I share food, I'm a good listener, and I've been told I give great hugs. Though I understand Zalathi aren't big on physical contact, so we can skip that part. The conversation was absurd. She was a senior diplomat, one of the most respected negotiators in the Galactic Council. He was a newcomer from a species that had barely left their home system. Friendship was not a concept that applied to her life anymore. I do not understand humans, she said instead of answering. Join the club. Half the time we don't understand ourselves. Marcus lay back on the floor, hands behind his head. But that's what makes us interesting. We're walking contradictions. We're fragile but resilient. We form attachments too easily, but that makes us fight harder to protect what we care about. We laugh when we should cry and cry when we should laugh. We're messy. Inefficient, Kiara corrected. Beautifully inefficient, Marcus agreed. Did you know humans are one of the only species that creates art for no purpose other than to create it? We make music no one will hear, paint pictures no one will see, write stories no one will read. Because the act of creation itself brings joy. Joy. The word felt foreign on her tongue. I have not experienced joy in 50 cycles. She had not meant to say it. The words escaped before she could stop them, a crack in the wall she had built so carefully. She waited for the pity, the uncomfortable silence, the awkward change of subject that always followed when someone glimpsed the emptiness inside her. Marcus simply nodded. That's a long time to carry that weight. I'm sorry for whatever happened that took your joy away. No questions, no probing, just acknowledgement and space for her to share or not share as she chose. It was so unexpectedly respectful that Kiara found herself speaking again. Zalathi bond for life. When my bondmate died, a part of me died with him. It is the way of my species. That must have been devastating, Marcus said softly. To lose someone that connected to you. Humans don't have telepathic bonds, but we love deeply. I lost my sister 5 years ago. Cancer. It felt like someone had torn a piece of my soul out and threw it into a black hole. Some days it still feels that way. They sat in silence for a moment, two beings from different worlds sharing a universal pain. How do you bear it? Kiara asked finally. How do you continue to feel joy when you have known such loss? Marcus was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. I don't think joy and sorrow cancel each other out. They exist together, like harmony and music. My sister is gone, and that will always hurt. But she also lived, and that will always be beautiful. When I laugh at a stupid joke or taste amazing food or make a new friend, I'm not betraying her memory. I'm honoring it. She would kick my ass if she knew I stopped living because she couldn't anymore. He sat up, reaching into his pocket to pull out a small device. Want to see something cool? Without waiting for an answer, he activated the device. A hologram sprang to life between them, a swirling galaxy of light points that Kiara recognized as a star map. But there was something different about it. This is every system humans have visited since we achieved FTL, Marcus explained. But see these connections? Thin lines of light connected the star systems, creating an intricate web. These aren't trade routes or travel paths. These are friendship lines. Every line represents a connection made between a human and someone from another species. A friendship, a romance, a collaboration, whatever you want to call it, it's connection. The web was surprisingly dense for such a young spacefaring species. Dozens of connections spreading out from Earth in all directions. This one, Marcus pointed to a line connecting Earth to a system Kiara recognized as the Vrex homeworld, is my buddy Chen and a Vrex poet named Grokthar. They write terrible poetry together and perform at open mic nights. This one is a human teacher who fell in love with an Altarian musician. They have 3 kids now. Don't ask me how that works biologically. I don't think anyone understands it. And this one, he went on, telling stories of connection after connection, his face animated with genuine delight. Each line was not just data, but a story, a life touched and changed by meeting someone different. Why do you collect these? Kiara asked. Because this is what humans bring to the galaxy, Marcus said simply. Not our technology. Lots of species are more advanced. Not our strength. We're physically inferior to most. But this thing where we see someone completely different from us and think, hey, want to be friends? This is our superpower. We connect. We build bridges. We find common ground in the most unlikely places. He deactivated the hologram and turned to her. You want to know the real reason I stood on that table yesterday? It wasn't just to tell a funny story. It's because when you walked in, every instinct I had said, this person needs a friend. So I made sure you'd remember me. Manipulation? Maybe a little, but with the best intentions. You are very strange, Kiara said. Thank you, Marcus replied as if it were a compliment. Perhaps to humans it was. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Kiara found herself studying the patterns of light, seeing them differently than she had in decades. Not cold, distant suns, but points of possibility, each one a world where someone might be looking back. "The trade negotiations," she said eventually. "We should discuss the amendments to Section 7. At 3 in the morning under the stars, Marcus laughed. "Ambassador, I'm starting to think you use work to avoid dealing with feelings." The accuracy of the observation should have offended her. Instead, she found herself considering it seriously. "Work has purpose. Feelings are complicated." "The best things usually are," Marcus said. "But okay, let's talk about Section 7. But first, try this piece. It's tuna, the king of sushi." The next several hours passed in a blur of conversation that wandered from trade routes to philosophy to the proper way to eat wasabi without crying. Marcus had a gift for making even the driest diplomatic details interesting, finding humor and humanity in subclauses and shipping regulations. When the station's day cycle began to lighten the observation deck, signaling the approaching artificial dawn, Kiara was surprised to realize she was reluctant for the conversation to end. "Same time tomorrow?" Marcus asked as they prepared to leave. "I'll bring something called tacos. You're going to love them, or hate them. But either way, it'll be an experience." "I have a conference call with the Zalathi High Council tomorrow at that time," Kiara said. "Day after then?" Marcus persisted. "Or the day after that? I'm remarkably patient for a human. It's one of my many charming qualities." Kiara found herself calculating her schedule, looking for openings. When had she last done that for anything other than official duties? "The day after tomorrow, I have 45 minutes between meetings at 1400 hours, she offered. "Perfect." 45 minutes of tacos and friendship. It's a date. Still not a date, he added quickly. "Unless... No, professional tacos, diplomatic tacos, tacos of international relations." That strange twitch at the corner of her mouth happened again. Stronger this time. After Marcus left, Kiara remained on the observation deck, watching the artificial sunrise paint the walls in shades of gold and pink. She thought about webs of connection spreading across the galaxy, about joy and sorrow existing together, about someone deciding to be her friend simply because he could. Her communication device chimed with a message. It was from Marcus, sent from wherever his quarters were. "Thanks for showing me the stars," it read. "They're even more beautiful when shared with a friend." Friend. There was that word again. Kiara stared at the message for a long moment. Then, moving carefully as if performing a delicate operation, she typed a response. "Thank you for the sushi." She hesitated, then added, "Friend." The word looked strange on the screen, foreign, impossible, but also, somehow, right. She sent the message before she could change her mind. The response came immediately, a series of small digital images that humans called emojis. A smiling face, a star, a heart, and what appeared to be a dancing cephalopod for reasons she could not fathom. 50 cycles of emptiness. And now this. A human who stood on tables and brought food from his homeworld and called her friend as if it were the easiest thing in the universe. It should not matter, could not matter. She was beyond such things. But as she finally left the observation deck, Kiara caught herself thinking about tacos and what they might taste like. About 45 minutes that suddenly seemed both too long and not nearly long enough. About the way stars looked different when you sat on the floor and shared them with someone who saw beauty everywhere. She did not understand what was happening. Did not want to understand it. Understanding meant acknowledging that the walls she had built so carefully were developing cracks. But for the first time in 50 cycles, she was curious about tomorrow. The next day passed in a blur of routine meetings and standard negotiations. But Kiara found her attention wandering in ways it never had before. During a particularly dry discussion of mineral rights, she caught herself wondering if tacos were crunchy or soft. While reviewing a trade manifest, she noticed that Earth exported something called chocolate and made a note to research it. Her assistant Vesnik noticed the change. "Ambassador, you seem distracted today." "I am functioning within normal parameters," she replied automatically. "Of course, Ambassador, but you've checked your chronometer 14 times in the past hour." Had she? Kiara had not realized. Time had become elastic suddenly, moving too fast and too slow simultaneously. When 1400 hours finally arrived the next day, she found herself walking to the small meeting room with an unfamiliar sensation in her chest. It took her several minutes to identify it. Anticipation. Marcus was there, of course, with another container of Earth food and that impossible smile. "Ambassador, perfect timing. I hope you're hungry because I might have gone overboard with the taco fixings. There's beef, chicken, fish, vegetarian, and something called mystery meat that I got from a food cart outside. I'm 90% sure it's safe for Zalathi consumption." 90%? Kayara raised what humans would call an eyebrow. "Okay, 85. But where's your sense of adventure?" She sat across from him, maintaining proper diplomatic distance. "I do not have a sense of adventure. I have a sense of duty and a highly developed risk assessment protocol." "Close enough," Marcus said cheerfully, laying out an array of colorful food items. "So tacos are interactive food. You build them yourself. Shell first, then meat, then toppings. It's like edible art. Here, watch." He demonstrated the assembly process with the same enthusiasm he brought to everything. Kayara watched, noting the inefficiency of food that required assembly, the high probability of structural failure, the mess potential. Then she tried to build one herself and understood. There was something oddly satisfying about choosing each component, building something unique to her preferences. When the shell cracked and half the contents spilled onto her plate, Marcus laughed, not at her but with delight. "That's part of the experience. Tacos are chaos you can eat. Embrace the mess, Ambassador." Embrace the mess. Such a human concept. "Tell me about your sister," Kayara said suddenly, surprising herself. Marcus paused mid-bite, his expression softening. "Sarah?" She was brilliant. A xenobiologist. She would have loved this. Meeting people from other worlds. She had this theory that life was the universe's way of understanding itself. Every species, every individual, a unique perspective that adds to the whole. She sounds remarkable. She was. She also couldn't carry a tune, burned every meal she tried to cook, and had the worst jokes in the galaxy. "I've got a million stories." "Tell me one," Kayara requested. So he did. And then another, and another. Stories of siblings and childhood, and a world that seemed impossibly full of connection and warmth. Kiara found herself listening not just to the words, but to the love behind them, the way grief and joy intertwined in every memory. "Do you have siblings?" Marcus asked eventually. "A clutch sister. We have not spoken in 30 cycles." The admission came easier than expected. "Why not? After Thyron died, I withdrew from everyone. It was easier to feel nothing than to feel everything." Marcus nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Easier but lonelier." "Yes," Kiara admitted. "Have you thought about reaching out? 30 cycles is a long time, but family is family. She would not understand who I have become." "Maybe that's exactly why you should call her. Let her meet who you are now. You might surprise each other." The 45 minutes stretched into an hour, then 2. Kiara's afternoon meetings forgotten as they talked and laughed. And yes, it was laughter. That strange sound that escaped her throat when Marcus told a particularly ridiculous story about his first attempt at zero-gravity cooking. When they finally parted, Marcus handed her a small object, a communication device. My personal channel, he explained, in case you need a friend at 3 in the morning, or 3 in the afternoon, or any time you want to talk about feelings or trade routes or why humans put pineapple on pizza. This is highly irregular, Kiara said, even as she pocketed the device. The best things usually are, Marcus replied with a wink. That night, alone in her quarters, Kiara held the communication device and thought about connections spanning star systems, about the courage it took to reach out across the void and say, "Want to be friends?" About the peculiar alchemy that could transform a stranger into someone who mattered. Before she could lose her nerve, she activated her personal communication system and sent a message to an address she had not used in 30 cycles. "Silara," she wrote to her clutch sister, "I met a human today who told me that family is family. I think I would like to remember what that means, if you are willing." She sent it before she could reconsider, then sat staring at the screen, terrified and hopeful in equal measure. The response came an hour later, just 3 words that somehow held 30 cycles of pain and love and possibility. "I've missed you." Kiara stared at the message and felt something crack inside her chest. Not breaking, but breaking open, like a shell that had grown too small for what was growing inside it. She picked up Marcus's communication device and sent a simple message. "Thank you." His response was immediate. "That's what friends are for. Also, brace yourself. Tomorrow I'm introducing you to something called ice cream. Your life will never be the same." Looking at the message, Kiara realized something that should have terrified her but somehow didn't. Her life was already never going to be the same, and for the first time in 50 cycles, that felt like a beginning instead of an ending. The message arrived on a Tuesday, 3 months after Kiara had first shared pizza with a human who stood on conference tables. Emergency session. All senior ambassadors required. Fringe Colony 7 crisis escalation. Kiara read it with the same detached professionalism she applied to all council summons. Fringe Colony 7 had been a point of tension for cycles. 3 species claiming rights to a world rich in rare minerals. The situation had been delicate but manageable. The word escalation changed everything. She arrived at the Grand Assembly to find chaos, ambassadors from a dozen species clustered in groups, voices raised in heated debate. The Vrex delegation growled in their corner, spines fully extended. The Altarians waved their tentacles in agitation. Even the normally serene ethereals flickered with distressed color patterns. "What happened?" she asked Ambassador Thek of the Morvans. "The Scarati moved a war fleet into the system," Thek replied, his scaled face grim. "The Zelati Mining Consortium responded by activating their defense platforms. The human colony ship caught in the middle sent a distress signal before going dark. 200,000 civilians, including families." Kiara felt her professional mask slip into place, cold and emotionless. This was what she excelled at. Navigating impossible situations without the burden of feelings. She moved through the crowd, gathering information, analyzing positions, calculating optimal outcomes. Then she saw him. Marcus stood with the human delegation, but he was transformed. Gone was the easy smile, the warm eyes, the boundless enthusiasm. His face was carved from stone, his posture rigid with controlled fury. When he spoke to his colleagues, his voice carried an edge she had never heard before. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment his expression softened, and she saw the depth of pain there. 200,000 humans in danger, families, children, his people. The formal session was a disaster. The Scarati representative insisted they had legal claim to the system. The Zalathi Consortium cited prior mining rights. The Morvans demanded immediate military intervention. Voices rose, accusations flew, and the careful diplomacy of centuries threatened to crumble. "Enough!" The council moderator's voice boomed through the chamber. "We will recess for 6 hours. Find a solution, or we will be forced to consider military options." As the assembly dispersed, Kiara found herself moving toward the human delegation. Marcus saw her coming and met her halfway. 200,000 people, he said without preamble. Families who came to build something. Children who were born on that ship. They're sitting in the dark right now, wondering if today is the day they die, because 3 governments can't agree on who owns rocks. "The situation is complex," Kiara began, falling back on diplomatic neutrality. "No," Marcus cut her off, and the sharpness in his voice made her step back. "It's not complex. It's simple. There are people in danger, and we're standing around debating mineral rights. This is exactly the kind of bureaucratic bullshit that—" He stopped himself, running a hand through his hair. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter but no less intense. "I'm sorry. I know you're trying to help. It's just... they're my people, Kai. And I can't stand here and be calm about it." Kai. He had started calling her that a month ago, and she had not corrected him. Now the nickname felt like a lifeline in the storm of the moment. "What do you need?" she asked. Marcus looked at her with surprise. "What?" "You are my friend," she said simply. "Your people are in danger. What do you need?" Something shifted in his expression. "I need a miracle. I need someone to cut through centuries of precedent and find a solution that doesn't end with a war or dead colonists. I need—" He paused, then gave a bitter laugh. "I need the impossible." "Then we will find the impossible." Kiara stated it as fact, not hope. For the next 6 hours, they worked together in a small conference room. Kiara brought her decades of experience, her encyclopedic knowledge of interstellar law, her ability to see patterns others missed. Marcus brought his human perspective, his refusal to accept no as an answer, his gift for reframing problems. "What if we're looking at this wrong?" Marcus said during their 3rd hour. "Everyone's focused on who owns the planet. But what if ownership isn't the question?" "Explain," Kiara prompted. "Earth has this place called Antarctica. For centuries, countries fought over who owned it. Then they realized fighting over it would destroy the very thing that made it valuable. So they created a treaty. No one owns it. Everyone can use it for research. Shared custody of something precious. The Scarati will never agree to share. Their culture views sharing as weakness. Then we don't call it sharing. We call it strategic resource maximization through coordinated development." Marcus grinned, the first real smile she had seen from him all day. "I've been reading your diplomatic texts. I'm getting good at making simple things sound complicated." They worked through proposals, discarding dozens before finding threads that might hold. Kiara found herself caught up in his determination, his absolute refusal to accept failure. When she pointed out a flaw, he found a workaround. When he hit a wall, she provided the key to go around it. "You know what I love about humans?" she said suddenly, surprising herself with the words. Marcus looked up from his notes. "What?" "You believe in impossible things. Even when all logic says otherwise, you believe there is always a solution." "Someone has to," he replied. "If we don't believe in impossible things, they never become possible. That's how we ended up in space in the first place. Someone looked at the stars and said, 'I bet we could get there,' and everyone called them crazy until the day we did it." In the 4th hour, Vesnik burst in. "Ambassadors, there's been a development. The human colony ship. They've restored partial power. They're transmitting." They rushed to the communications center where a crowd had gathered. On the main screen, a human face appeared, haggard but determined. The captain of the colony ship. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the ESS New Horizon. Yes, Chen, Marcus is my cousin. Small galaxy, right? We have partial power restored, but our situation is deteriorating. To the representatives of the Scarati Federation and the Zalathi Consortium, we have a message for you." The screen split, showing the interior of the ship. Hundreds of humans working together, some at emergency stations, others tending to children, everyone moving with purpose despite the danger. We came here to build, not to take. These families represent 17 Earth nations, united in the dream of creating something new. We don't care who owns this rock. We care about the future we're trying to build on it. If we die here today, it won't be as victims. It will be as people who believed the galaxy could be better than this, who believed that different species could find a way to live together. So whatever you decide, know that we face it without fear and without hatred. Only disappointment that we couldn't show you what we might have built together. The transmission ended. The room was silent. Then the Scarati ambassador spoke, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. The humans, they are not afraid? They're terrified, Marcus said. But they choose hope over fear. It's what we do. It's all we've ever done. We're the species that looked at space, an environment that kills us in seconds, and decided to go anyway. Not because we're brave, because we're too stubborn to let fear win. Kiara watched the other ambassadors. Something was shifting in the room. The human response had confused them. Most species would have begged or threatened or raged. Humans had chosen something else entirely. "I have a proposal," she announced, her voice carrying the full weight of her reputation. "Based on the human concept of Antarctic preservation, modified for our circumstances." She laid out the plan she and Marcus had developed, enhanced now by what they had just witnessed. A trust system with shared development, rotating administration, and most importantly, the human colony as neutral mediators. "You want to put humans in charge of mediation?" The Vrex ambassadors' spines rattled with disbelief. "They've been spacefaring for less than 50 cycles." "Precisely," Kiara replied. "They have no historical claims, no ancient grudges, no complicated alliances. They see possibility where we see conflict. They build connections where we build walls. Who better to administrate a shared trust than the species that thinks friendship is a decision you can make in an afternoon?" Marcus shot her a look of such gratitude and affection that she felt something flutter in her chest, a sensation she had not experienced in 50 cycles. The debate that followed was intense but different. The human transmission had changed the emotional temperature of the room. Where before there had been only anger and territorial posturing, now there was something else. Shame, perhaps, or recognition. "The humans on that ship," the Altarian ambassador said slowly, tentacles weaving a pattern of deep thought. "They include children?" "Yes," Marcus confirmed, "and they chose to face death with hope?" "It's kind of our thing," Marcus said. "We're irrationally optimistic. It's a design flaw that occasionally saves the galaxy." One by one, the pieces fell into place. Not easily, not without heated negotiation, but with a momentum that felt inevitable. The Scarati agreed to the trust proposal with modifications. The Zalathi Consortium accepted shared mining rights. The Morvans offered to provide security forces. When the final agreement was reached, a document that would be studied in diplomatic schools for generations, the human colony ship was hailed with the news. The celebration visible on the screen was infectious. Humans hugging, crying, laughing all at once. Captain Chen saluted the assembly with tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for choosing hope." As the assembly dispersed, Marcus found Kiara in the crowd and, without warning, wrapped her in a fierce hug. She stiffened for a moment. Zalathi did not embrace, then slowly, carefully, returned the gesture. "We did it," he whispered against her ear. "You did it. You beautiful, brilliant, impossible person." The sensation of being held, of warm arms around her, of connection made physical, overwhelmed her. She had forgotten what touch could mean, how it could anchor you to the moment, to another person, to life itself. When they finally separated, she saw several ambassadors watching with interest. The cold, emotionless Zalathi ambassador embracing a human. It would be gossip for weeks. She found she did not care. "There's going to be a celebration," Marcus said. "The human delegation is hosting. Real food, real music, real joy. Come with me." "I do not celebrate," Kiara said automatically. "You do now," Marcus replied, taking her hand. "New rule. When we save 200,000 lives, we celebrate. It's mandatory. I'm making it a diplomatic protocol." The human celebration was unlike any diplomatic function Kiara had attended. Music filled the air, chaotic and rhythmic and alive. Humans danced with abandon, pulling bewildered members of other species into their orbit. Food appeared from seemingly nowhere, a potluck of Earth cuisines that turned the formal reception hall into something resembling a family gathering. "Ambassador Kiara!" A young human woman approached, beaming. "Marcus has told us so much about you. You're the one who introduced him to proper Zalathi tea ceremony, right? He's obsessed now, keeps trying to get the meditation right." Others joined them, sharing stories of Marcus that painted a picture of someone who collected friendships like others collected art. He had taught Vrex poetry to human children, learned Altarian tentacle weaving, started an interspecies cooking club that had somehow become one of the most popular gatherings on the station. "He talks about you constantly," one of his colleagues confided. "Kai this, Kai that. I've never seen him so—" She paused, searching for words. "So invested in someone." Kiara felt that flutter again, stronger now. She found Marcus on the balcony later, away from the noise, staring out at the stars. He had removed his formal jacket, and his shirt was stained with something that might have been Altarian wine. He looked exhausted and exhilarated and utterly human. "Thank you," he said as she joined him, "for believing in impossible things." "You taught me how," she replied. They stood in comfortable silence, watching ships depart to spread news of the agreement. The colony ship would reach its destination safely. Lives would be built instead of lost. The galaxy had chosen connection over conflict, at least for today. "Kai," Marcus said softly, "can I tell you something?" She nodded. "These past 3 months, they've been the best of my life. And I know that sounds crazy because we almost started a war today, but it's true. Getting to know you, watching you remember how to laugh, seeing you reconnect with your sister, being there when you tried chocolate for the first time and made that face. It was unexpectedly intense," Kiara defended. "Everything good is," Marcus replied. "The thing is, I made a decision that first day, to be your friend, but somewhere along the way, it became more than that. For me, at least. And I need you to know that, even if you don't feel the same. Even if you can't feel the same. I needed you to know that you brought light back into someone's life, too." The words hung between them like stars. Kiara felt her heart. Had it always been beating this fast? And understood with sudden perfect clarity what was happening. The flutter in her chest, the way time moved differently when he was near, the emptiness she felt when he was gone. "Thyron was my bondmate," she said slowly. "When he died, I thought my capacity for connection died with him. I thought I could never. She paused, searching for words in a vocabulary she had abandoned decades ago. "And then a human stood on a conference table," she continued, "and brought me pizza, and called me friend, and showed me that connection isn't something that happens to you. It's something you choose, every day, every moment." Marcus turned to face her fully, hope and uncertainty warring in his expression. "I do not know how to love as humans do," Kiara admitted, But I know that when you are near, the universe makes sense in ways it hasn't for 50 cycles. I know that your laugh is my favorite sound. I know that when you were in danger today, I would have torn apart the galaxy to keep you safe. If that is love, it is, Marcus breathed. It absolutely is. When he kissed her, it was nothing like the formal touch of Zalathi affection. It was warm and messy and perfectly imperfect. It was human. It was impossible. It was exactly right. They were interrupted by cheering. The entire human delegation had apparently been watching from inside and now poured onto the balcony with congratulations and something called champagne that bubbled in ways that defied physics. To impossible things, someone toasted. To connection across the cosmos, another added. To love that breaks all the rules, a third chimed in. Marcus and Kiara were swept back into the celebration, but now they moved through it together. His hand in hers, an anchor in the beautiful chaos of human joy. Later, much later, when the party had wound down and the station had returned to its quiet rhythm, they stood once more at the observation deck, where it had all begun. But now Kiara saw the stars differently, not cold and distant, but warm with possibility. So what happens now? Marcus asked. A human and a Zalathi. No precedent for this. No protocols, no rules. We make our own, Kiara said simply. Isn't that what humans do? Make impossible things possible? Yeah, Marcus agreed, pulling her closer. That's exactly what we do. As the stars wheeled overhead, Kiara thought about the journey that had brought her here. 50 cycles of emptiness, ended by a human who believed friendship was a choice and love was worth the risk. She thought about walls breaking down, about hearts learning to beat again, about the courage it took to choose connection in a universe that offered so many reasons not to. Marcus, she said, I love you too. The words, impossible for so long, came as easily as breathing, because that's what love was, she realized. Not the desperate telepathic bond she had shared with Thyron, beautiful as that had been, but this choice, made fresh each day, to see someone in all their chaotic, imperfect glory and say yes, again and again, yes. Marcus grinned, that impossibly warm expression that had started everything. Want to celebrate with ice cream? I've been saving this flavor called Rocky Road for a special occasion. Seemed appropriate, rocky road to get here, but worth every bump. Yes, Kiara laughed, and the sound filled the observation deck like starlight. To Rocky Road. They walked hand in hand through the station, past the conference room where a human had stood on a table, past the small room where they had shared sushi and secrets, past all the places where impossible things had become real. Behind them, the stars continued their eternal dance, witness to another impossible thing. A heart that had forgotten how to love. Learning that sometimes the spark you think is gone forever is just waiting for the right person to kindle it back to life. And in the human quarters, over bowls of ice cream and stories that would last until the artificial dawn, two souls from different worlds proved once again that connection was the most powerful force in the universe. Not because it was logical or efficient or even probable, but because someone decided to stand on a table and choose friendship. Because someone believed in impossible things. Because love, like humans themselves, found a way.